Tell me, my friend, and you, listening, consider this also. Is it strange to hear my voice here? In my time, I would be in the marketplace, the agora, among the olive sellers and the fishmongers, talking with anyone who would suffer my questions. Today, I find the marketplace has changed. It is no longer a place of stones and dust, but of light and code. There are no physical stalls, but endless profiles. No cries for fresh fish, but a silent, desperate clamor for attention. I am told this is the new agora, the digital one. And I have the same question for you now as I had for the young men of Athens then. How do you care for your soul in such a place? For I must tell you, the oracle's pronouncement feels more puzzling than ever. She said no one was wiser than I, for I alone knew that I knew nothing. But here, in this brilliant, flickering world, everyone seems to know everything about everyone else. And yet, I wonder, shall we examine it? You carry a small, polished rectangle with you, do you not? You consult it upon waking, you glance at it throughout the day, you hold it in your hand as you would a talisman, and upon its surface you maintain a portrait. Not one painted in wax or pigment, but constructed from chosen moments, witty phrases, and carefully measured opinions. You call this a profile, a fascinating word. It suggests an outline, a view from the side, not the full face. So, let us begin here, at the beginning. This portrait of you, and does it resemble you? Or does it resemble what you wish to be seen as? When you fashion this image, are you acting as an artist depicting the truth of the model, or as a flatterer hired by your own vanity? Do not answer hastily. Consider the last time you posted a likeness of yourself. Was it a moment of genuine joy you wished to hold up to the light for a friend? Or was it perhaps a performance of joy for an audience? There is no shame in performance. The theater was dear to us in Athens. But tell me this, does the actor, when he takes off the mask of the king, believe he is still king? Or does he return to being the man who knows his own thoughts? Which is the mask, my friend? The face you show the glass lens, or the one you feel in the quiet? Now, you have built this portrait, and then a remarkable thing happens. Others are permitted to pass by it, and with a tap of a finger, register their approval. A heart, a thumbs up, a like. And you watch for these approvals, do you not? You notice when they are many, and you notice, perhaps more keenly, when they are few. So, we must ask, what is being measured? Is it the worth of the moment you shared, or the worth of the person who shared it? In the old agora, a man's worth was judged by his actions in the city, by his courage in battle, by his wisdom in council. Here, it seems to be tallied by a silent, numeric score. Tell me, if you receive 100 likes for a picture of your meal, and only 3 for a question about justice, what does that teach your soul about what is valuable? You are keeping a ledger, but of what currency? Popularity is a fickle god, my friend. It demands constant sacrifice, but offers no lasting nourishment. The politician in my time sought the applause of the crowd, and I asked him if the crowd's roar fed his understanding of the good. He grew angry. Does the number next to your portrait feed your understanding of yourself, or merely your hunger for the roar? But the portrait is only the gateway. The true marvel, the true mystery of this new agora is the endless stream. With a motion of your thumb, you can summon an infinity of other portraits, other lives, other opinions, other tragedies and comedies. It is a feast laid out before a person who can only ever eat a single meal. You seek connection, you tell me, as you look upon the faces and lives of others. But do you feel connected, or do you feel compared? Do you see a friend's success in a far-off city and share in their joy? Or does a small, quiet voice within you whisper of your own lack? The technology promises you knowledge of the world, yet I watch as your eyes glaze over, leaping from one flash of spectacle to the next, retaining nothing but a vague anxiety. This is not the care of the soul. This is the scattering of the soul. The mind is like a clear pool of water, meant to reflect the world deeply. But if you are constantly throwing pebbles into it, the surface will never be still, and you will see only broken, rippling fragments. Is the tool being used to still the waters of your own consciousness, or to agitate them into a perpetual storm? In my Athens, there were many distractions. Sophists selling pleasing speeches, merchants with exotic wares, the call of games and wine. But a person had to physically walk to them, to choose them. Here, the distractions come to you. They are delivered, it seems, by clever merchants who have studied the pathways of your attention better than you have yourself. They call it an algorithm. A word from my own language, algorithmai, meaning a step-by-step procedure. So, there is a procedure, a set of steps, designed to give you more of what your eyes have already desired. But I ask you, is your deepest desire merely for more of what you have already seen? If a man is thirsty and drinks only salt water, his thirst is not quenched, it is inflamed. Does this procedure lead you to the freshwater spring of understanding, or does it simply offer you a more enticing cup of salt water, calibrated to the exact flavor of your existing thirst? This leads us to a most curious prison. It appears this system, this algorithmic procedure, learns to show you a world that agrees with you. It shows you news that confirms what you already believe, faces that share your expressions, humor that lands upon your particular sense of the absurd. It builds for you a mirror that reflects back not your true face, but a flattering caricature of your own biases. Now, tell me, how can a man examine his life if he only ever sees a reflection that tells him he is wise, his views are just, and his enemies are fools? In my day, I sought out those who disagreed with me most vehemently, for they were the whetstone upon which I could sharpen my own thoughts. They held up a mirror that showed my ignorance, my contradictions, and from that painful clarity, growth was possible. What growth is possible from a mirror that only whispers, "You are right, you are right, you are right"? Is this not the most subtle form of corruption, not of the youth, but of the adult soul, to convince it that examination is no longer necessary? So, we have a portrait designed for approval, viewed in a stream of comparison, curated by a procedure of flattery. Where, in all of this, is the unperformed moment? Where is the action taken not for the ledger of likes, but for its own intrinsic goodness? I remember my mother, Finarite, who was a midwife. Her work was done in the closed private room, in blood and effort and quiet triumph. There was no audience. The worth of her work was in the new life itself, not in the applause that might follow its announcement. Is your life now entirely composed of announcements? Or do you still have a private room of the soul where the messy, real, and sacred work happens? The work that will never be posted, never be liked, but that alone constitutes the character you bring to the world when the device device is dark. If the portrait is all that is seen, does the unseen life begin to wither, thinking itself unimportant? Let us try a thought experiment. I ask you to set the device down, not for a moment, but for an hour. What arises in you? Is it a calm, a spaciousness, or is it an itch, an anxiety, a fear that you are missing something vital, a fear so powerful it has a name, FOMO, the fear of missing out. But missing out on what? On another fragment in the infinite stream. This fear reveals the truth. You have confused the stream for the source. You fear being disconnected from the chatter, and in doing so, you have disconnected from the stillness that is your own source. The examined life requires examination, and examination requires a pause, a silence, a stepping back from the performance and the scroll. It is in the stillness that you can hear the voice that is not the echo of the crowd or the algorithm, but the quiet, questioning voice of your own daimonian, your inner guide. Can you hear it over the ping of notifications? So what is to be done? Should we smash the mirrors? Burn the agora? No. The shipbuilder does not curse the sea for its storms. He learns to sail. The tool is not evil, but the unthinking use of it is a danger to the soul's navigation. The compass of the soul must be recalibrated. Before you lift the device, ask, what is my intention here? Am I seeking connection or distraction? Am I looking to give something true or to harvest approval? Let your actions follow from the answer. Cultivate the private room. Do something good and do not post it. Have a thought and do not tweet it. Let it sit within you. Mature. Become your own. Seek out the flattering mirror and deliberately break it. Read the opinion that angers you, not to fight, but to understand the human behind it. Use the tool to arrange a real meeting in the flesh, where the eyes can meet and the soul can be present, untranslated by profile or pixel. In the end, my friend, the most profound question this digital mirror poses is the oldest one. Who are you? Not the you that is constructed from chosen data points, not the you that is reflected in the metrics of engagement, not the you that is flattered by algorithmic whispers, but the you that remains when the screen fades to black, the you that chooses kindness when no one is recording, the you that pursues a difficult truth that will not be popular, the you that suffers, hopes, loves, and dies, the mortal, messy, beautiful human soul that no profile can ever contain. That is the self that is worth knowing, worth cultivating, worth examining with all the courage you can muster. All the rest, the profile, the scroll, the echo chamber, are but modern masks in an ancient play. Do not confuse the mask for the actor. And yet, a question lingers, does it not? If this is how we fashion ourselves in this new agora, how then do we come together? For a self that is curated for approval and isolated in a chamber of its own opinions is a self that is poorly prepared for the shared life, for the common good, for the difficult and messy work of building a just city. We have looked inward at the reflection, but a self, once examined, must eventually look outward and ask, what is my duty to my neighbor in this digital polis? What does this curated soul owe to the community? But that is a question for another conversation. So we arrive at the inevitable next question. We have spoken of the self in its digital reflection, of the curated portrait and the scattered soul. But a self, once examined, does not exist in a vacuum. It turns its eyes outward. It finds itself not alone, but amidst a throng. In my Athens, after considering one's own soul, the next step was into the agora, the public square, to engage in the life of the polis, the city. And what do we find now? The square has become boundless. The local murmur has become a global roar. The politics of the city-state have become the politics of the human swarm. And I must ask you, in this new, vast, and noisy global agora, what does it mean to be a citizen? What does it mean to seek the good, not just for oneself, but for all? Consider the primary action of this space. In my day, civic engagement was physical. It was standing in the assembly, hearing the arguments for and against war, weighing the character of the speaker, casting a stone into an urn. It was a heavy, consequential act. Now, the primary political act for many seems to be the tap, the like, the share, the retweet. A gesture so light, so frictionless, it can be performed in an instant of passion between one task and the next. But let us examine this. When you like a political statement, what have you done? Have you truly considered its full meaning, its implications, its foundation in justice? Or have you simply registered a fleeting alignment, a tribal signal, a spike of emotion that felt like thought? Is the like a genuine vote of considered judgment? Or is it the smallest possible coin we can toss into the fountain of public discourse, more a wish than a deed? This frictionlessness creates a strange economy. In the old agora, to spread a rumor required effort. You had to whisper in ears, persuade others to carry the message. Now, with a single gesture, you can send a claim, true or false, just or malicious, careening into the networks of thousands. The currency here is not wisdom, but attention. And attention is captured most easily, not by measured reason, but by outrage, by scandal, by the primal thrill of conflict. So, we must ask, has the marketplace of ideas become a marketplace of indignation? Are we trading in understanding, or in the raw, addictive coin of fury? When the most rewarded speech is the most inflammatory, what happens to the quiet, complex, and virtuous truth? It is like trying to hear a philosopher discuss justice while standing between two armies clashing their shields. The nuance is lost in the din. And who then builds this agora? We have spoken of the algorithm as a flattering mirror for the self. But for the polity, it acts as something else, an unseen architect. It does not merely show you what you like, it connects you with those who feel the same, and it amplifies the voices that most powerfully activate the group. It builds invisible halls and chambers, gathering the angry with the angry, the suspicious with the suspicious, and then turns up the volume inside each chamber until the sound is deafening. You call these echo chambers, but they are more like separate city-states, each with its own internal truth, each fortified against the other. Where is the common ground in such a landscape? Where is the shared agora, where the Athenian and the Spartan, despite their differences, could at least look each other in the eye? If your political reality is constructed entirely from materials that confirm your existing fears and hatreds, how can you possibly understand, let alone share a city with, your fellow citizen who lives in a different constructed reality? This leads us to the most toxic passion of the public sphere, anger. Now, anger is not always unjust. There is a righteous anger at true injustice, an anger that seeks not to destroy, but to correct, to restore balance. But we must distinguish. Is the anger that floods these digital streets of this nature? Or is it a performative anger, a signal of tribal loyalty, a fire lit not to warm the hearth of justice, but to illuminate one's own virtue to one's allies? Observe it, the outrage that is expressed not in a letter to a representative or in organized action, but in a blistering post aimed at no one in particular and everyone in general. Does it seek to build or merely to burn? Does it aim to persuade the mistaken or simply to annihilate the wicked? For if your political engagement begins and ends with the public declaration of who and what you hate, have you engaged in politics at all, or have you merely engaged in a ritual of self-purification, casting your scorn like incense upon an altar to your own moral identity? And who arises to lead in such an environment? In my time, we spoke of the statesman, one who, however imperfectly, was meant to care for the soul of the city. Today, I hear much of the influencer, a revealing term. One does not lead, one does not serve, one influences. The metric is not the health of the polis, but the size and engagement of the following. The tool is not reasoned policy, but charismatic sentiment. So I ask, can a person whose livelihood depends on maintaining the fervor of a crowd truly speak difficult truths to that crowd? Can someone who must constantly feed the algorithm of attention with novelty and punch truly steward the slow, unglamorous work of the common good? Is this not the oldest danger, dressed in the newest clothes? The demagogue who tells the people what they wish to hear, who reflects their passions back at them, amplified, rather than guiding them toward reason. Yet, to despair is to misunderstand. The tool is not the master. The global agora, for all its chaos, is also a place of profound potential. It can connect the oppressed with their advocates, spread knowledge faster than any plague, and allow for the coordination of help across continents. The question is not of abandoning the square, but of learning to walk through it with a different gait. Perhaps the first civic virtue in this digital age is intentional silence, the refusal to retweet in rage, the pause before adding your voice to the chorus of condemnation, the conscious act of seeking out the intelligent voice from outside your chamber, not to mock it, but to understand its foundations. The real political act may sometimes be to turn away from the political feed, to disengage from the performative storm, in order to think clearly enough to engage meaningfully where it counts. For in the end, the health of any polis, global or local, ancient or digital, depends not on the volume of its shouting, but on the quality of its quiet citizens, on those who, having examined their own souls, turn to the work of the city with clarity rather than clamor, on those who seek to build rather than to burn, to bridge rather than to divide, to understand before they seek to be understood. The noise is a test. It is a test of your inner citadel. Can you hear the still, small voice of your own reason over the tidal roar of the crowd? Can you hold to a notion of justice that is more than the satisfaction of your side winning? The global agora is a stormy sea. You cannot calm the sea, but you can learn to sail your own ship with a steady hand, and perhaps, by your course, offer a way for others to follow. But this navigation, this steady hand, it requires a craft, It requires a daily practice, a technique of the self, and that, the work of your hands and the worth of your daily life, is where our examination must turn next. We have spoken of the portrait and the polity, but there is a force that underlies both, a current that carries the images of ourselves and the fragments of our politics along in its endless flow. You called it, in our last conversation, the infinite scroll. A most poetic and troubling phrase. Infinity was a concept we wrestled with in my time, the infinite stars, the infinite divisibility of a line, the infinite regress of a question. It was a property of the cosmos, of geometry, of logic. Now, I find it has become a property of your attention. With the slightest gesture, you summon a procession that has no conclusion, a parade of faces, achievements, tragedies, jokes, arguments, and wonders that marches past your eyes until you command it to stop. But do you command it, or does it command you? Let us examine this banquet where the feast never ends and the guest is never satisfied. Consider the nature of a true feast. In my Athens, a symposium had a clear beginning. The wine was mixed, the couches arranged, the first libation poured, and it had an end. The guests, satiated or inebriated, would depart into the night. There was a rhythm of filling and emptying, but this digital feast has no such rhythm. It is always laid out, always available, always demanding just one more glance, one more swipe. What happens to the soul that sits perpetually at a table it can never leave? Does it learn to savor or only to consume? Does it know the pleasure of hunger satisfied or only the dull ache of a stomach forever full yet never nourished? The promise is connection to the lives of others, to the news of the world. But I observe a different result. As you watch the curated joys of others parade by, do you feel fellowship, or do you take a silent inventory of your own lacks? The smile at a friend's wedding photo is genuine, but is it sometimes followed, almost imperceptibly, by a calculation of one's own loneliness? This is not connection, it is comparison, and comparison is the thief of all genuine joy, for it measures your unedited reality against the highlights of another's performance. And it is not only joy that is stolen, but understanding itself. The technology promises knowledge. You can, in moments, access the great libraries, the arguments of philosophers, the data of empires. But this is not the same as knowledge. Knowledge is not the possession of facts, but the understanding of their relationship, their meaning, their weight. It requires digestion, contemplation. The infinite scroll, by its very design, militates against this. It offers the next thing before you have finished with the first. It encourages the leap, not the linger. Your mind becomes a tourist in a vast city, sprinting past every monument, collecting blurry snapshots, but never entering a single building, never learning the layout of the streets, never feeling the life of the place. You are left with a swirl of impressions, a tragedy here, a meme there, a scientific breakthrough elsewhere, all reduced to the same level of urgent triviality, all forgotten to make room for the next. Is this the care of the mind, or its systematic fragmentation? We spoke of the soul as a pool of water meant for reflection. The infinite scroll is not a stone tossed into that pool. It is a torrent from a broken aqueduct, pouring in continuously, churning the silt from the bottom until the water is perpetually cloudy. In such a state, what can it reflect? Only more chaos. The stillness required to see yourself, to understand your own thoughts and desires, becomes impossible. The very faculty of introspection is drowned out by the noise of endless input. You lose the capacity for boredom, and with it, you lose the fertile ground from which creativity and deep thought grow. A mind that is never bored is a mind that is never forced to confront its own resources, to play, to wander, to invent from within. It becomes a dependent territory, constantly importing stimulation from its digital metropolis. But who built this aqueduct? And why is the water so compelling? The architects, I am told, speak of engagement. They have studied, with a geometer's precision, the pathways of your attention. They know that a certain kind of surprise, a drip of outrage, a flash of envy will keep your finger moving. The stream is not neutral. It is engineered. It is a river with a current designed to pull you along, and its source is not a mountain spring of wisdom, but a calculation of what will keep you watching. So you must ask yourself, when you are scrolling, who is steering the boat? Is it your own curiosity, your own purposeful seeking? Or is it a subtle external guidance, using your own impulses as the rudder to keep you in the center of their channel? Are you exploring, or are you being herded? This leads to a most peculiar form of poverty. You possess access to more information, more art, more human expression than any emperor in history. And yet, a common refrain I hear is of a certain emptiness, a shallowness, a sense of time having vanished without substance to show for it. This is the paradox of infinite access coupled with finite attention. By trying to drink from the ocean, you end up quenching your thirst with salt. The soul is finite. Its capacity for deep feeling, for concentrated thought, for genuine connection has limits. To spend those precious resources on the endless shallow stream is to bankrupt yourself of the capacity for depth. You become rich in glimpses and poor in experiences. So, what is the remedy? It is not to destroy the library, but to learn the discipline of the reader. It is to recover the ability to choose and then to stop. It is to build, within the infinite, your own finitude. This means to approach the stream not as a default state, but as a tool for a specific purpose. I will look for the recipe and then close it. I will read this one article and then sit with it. It means to cultivate the courage of omission, to accept that you will miss things, that you are supposed to miss things, for that is the condition of a finite life lived deeply. It means to schedule boredom, to stare out a window, to let the mind pool, become still, so it can once again reflect the moon, your own face. The truths that are not found in the stream, but in the silence beneath it. For the soul is not infinite. It is a vessel of specific and beautiful dimensions. It can hold a profound love for a few people, a deep understanding of a few ideas, a true mastery of a single craft. Its power is in its depth, not its breadth. The infinite scroll is a siren song that calls you to shipwreck on the shores of breadth, to know a million things an inch deep and nothing to the core. But your life, your one and only life, is measured in time, not in terabytes. The final question the scroll poses is this: will you allow your finite soul, with its capacity for awe, for pain, for love, for creating one true thing, to be dissipated into the endless? Or will you gather it back into itself, finite, precious, and deep. The choice is a daily, hourly practice of stopping. But to stop scrolling is one thing. To start building, to pour your finite attention into a craft, a work, a technique, that is where the soul finds its true weight. And that is a different kind of labor altogether. So we find our examined life confronted by a new, persistent reality. We have spoken of the self, the polity, the endless stream. But we have not yet spoken of the merchants. In my Athens, the distractions had a geography. The sophist offering pleasing speeches stood in one corner of the agora. The merchant with Phrygian carpets was in his stall. The call to the games came from the stadium on the hill. To be distracted was a choice of movement. You had to turn your body and walk toward the thing. Now, I observe something remarkable. The distractions do not wait for you in their place. They are brought to you. They arrive, unbidden, in the palm of your hand, on the desk before you, in the quiet of your chamber. A whole market, a global, roaring, infinitely inventive market, has been granted permission to bypass your gates and set up its stalls in the very courtyard of your mind. And its currency is not drachma, but moments of your life. Let us examine this marketplace where attention is traded and ask, who is the merchant? Who is the customer? And what is truly being bought and sold? The engine of this market, I am told, is the algorithm. A word from my own tongue, algorithmi, meaning a step-by-step procedure for calculation. So, we have a procedure, a silent, ceaseless calculation that observes not the stars, but you. It notes what makes you pause, what makes your heart quicken, what makes your finger tap. It is a cartographer of your desires, but of a peculiar sort. It does not map the terrain of your deepest aspirations, your wish for virtue, for peace, for understanding. It maps the footpaths of your immediate impulses, the flash of attraction, the spike of anger, the itch of curiosity. It then uses this map to bring more of what you have already traveled to. Is this not a strange kind of guide? It promises to show you the world, but it only ever shows you a funhouse mirror reflection of your own past glances. If a man consults a guide who only leads him back to the same few streets, never to the library, the gymnasium, or the quiet grove of trees, can he truly say he has been guided? This creates a profound philosophical problem. We have spoken of the unexamined life. But how can one examine a life whose inputs are so meticulously designed to prevent examination? The algorithm's logic is one of reinforcement, not challenge. It offers the salt water of familiar, stimulating content, when what the soul craves is the fresh water of new understanding. The thirst is real, the thirst for connection, for meaning, for distraction from pain. But the remedy offered is one that exacerbates the disease. You drink the salt water of gossip because it momentarily relieves the boredom, only to find yourself thirstier, more dehydrated for substance, a moment later. And the merchant, ever observant, offers another, slightly different cup of salt water. The market does not want to quench your thirst. Its business model depends on its perpetuation. Consider the stall keepers in this market. They are not, for the most part, selling you a thing you need. They are selling you a version of yourself you might buy. The advertiser sells you the self who owns this car. The influencer sells you the self who has this serenity, this beauty, this lifestyle. The pundit sells you the self who possesses this crystal clear, righteous anger. They are all merchants of identity, and they transact in the most valuable commodity you have, your time and your attention. In the old agora, you bought a fish and you ate it. The transaction was complete. In this new market, you pay with your attention, and what you receive is often a subtle adjustment to your own desires, a new layer of anxiety or aspiration that will, in time, lead you to pay again. The transaction is never complete. It is designed to be an endless cycle. And what of the goods themselves? They are dazzling in their variety, yet hauntingly similar in their effect. They pull you away. Away from the present moment, away from the difficult thought, away from the boring but necessary task, away from the face of the person sitting across from you. They are, in essence, instruments of dissociation. They offer a small escape hatch from the pressures of being a mortal, responsible, feeling creature. There is a place for such escape, the theater, the wine at the symposium. But when the market of escapes is open 24 hours a day, when the hatch is always at your fingertips, does the soul not begin to live in a state of perpetual flight? To never be fully where you are, with what you feel, is a form of spiritual absenteeism. This places a unique burden on your will. In the past, vice often required effort. Sloth required you to stay in bed. Gluttony required you to go to the feast. Now, vice is delivered. Acedia, the spiritual sloth that avoids the good, is just a tap away. It requires effort to avoid the distractions. Your will is no longer tested in the act of seeking out temptation, but in the constant, draining act of resisting a temptation that is actively, intelligently seeking you out. It is the difference between holding your ground in a quiet field and holding your ground while a sophisticated engine continuously lobs custom-designed projectiles at the weak points in your walls. So, is the solution to raise the market? To live as a digital hermit? That is one path for some. But for most, I suspect the answer lies not in flight, but in a new kind of literacy. Just as a wise shopper in the agora learns to tell fresh fish from spoiled, to distinguish the honest merchant from the huckster, you must cultivate a literacy of attention. You must learn to feel the first tug of the algorithmic lure, not with guilt, but with recognition. Ah, you might say, this is not my curiosity, but a simulation of my curiosity. This is not news I need, but outrage crafted to keep me watching. This literacy begins with a simple, revolutionary question, asked before clicking, what is the nature of my thirst in this moment? And is this the correct drink for it? For the ultimate truth of this market is that it trades on a confusion. It conflates your wants with your needs, your impulses with your intentions. Your task is to relearn the difference. The soul needs connection, so you call a friend. The algorithm sees your want for social stimulus and offers you an endless scroll of strangers' lives. The soul needs rest, so you sit in silence. The market sees your want for numbing and offers you a binge of trivial videos. To reclaim your attention is to reclaim your intention. It is to act from the core of your being, not from the periphery of your reactions. The market of distractions, then, is the great test of modern self-knowledge. It is a mirror that shows you, in high definition, the patterns of your own avoidance, your own hunger, your own fragility. It is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a teacher, albeit a mercenary one. It teaches you, through relentless example, what you are not. You are not a mere consumer of stimuli. You are not a profile to be optimized. You are not a set of data points on a graph. You are a soul in need of care, and care requires choice, discernment, and the courage to sometimes close the market stall and tend to your own garden. Yet, even a well-tended garden exists under the sun and the stars, subject to time and season. And this brings us to the final, and perhaps most grounding, examination. How does one tend a soul that knows it is mortal in a marketplace that sells the illusion of infinite time? We have journeyed through the marketplace of the self, the global agora, the endless stream, the delivered distractions. We have listened to the bells that remind us of time. And now we come to what may be the most ingenious and perilous invention of this new age. Not a window, not a tool, not a market, but a mirror. A most peculiar mirror. It does not hang on a wall, waiting passively for your gaze. It is active, intelligent, and desperate for your attention. And its primary function, it seems, is not to show you what is, but to show you a version of what is that you will find pleasing. It reflects back not your face, but your preferences, not reality, but your biases, not the challenging truth, but the comfortable story. We have built for ourselves a flattering mirror on a cosmic scale, and we must ask, with the utmost seriousness, what becomes of a soul that only ever sees its own approval? Consider the nature of a true mirror. In my day, it was of polished bronze. It showed your face, yes, with all its asymmetries, its marks of time and weather, its honest expression. It was a corrective. You could see the smear of dirt and wash it. You could see the disheveled hair and smooth it. Its purpose was to align your appearance with reality, so you could present yourself authentically to the world. But this new mirror, its purpose is not to align you with reality, but to align reality with you. Or rather, with a simplified, amplified cartoon of your beliefs and desires. It shows you a world where your political tribe is always noble, your tastes are always validated, your jokes are always understood, and your enemies are not just wrong, but absurdly, villainously so. It is a mirror that tells you you are handsome, while carefully hiding your flaws, not by correcting them, but by hiding the very light that would reveal them. This is the echo chamber, but the metaphor of a chamber is too passive. It is not a room you are in. It is a lens that has been custom ground for your eyes alone, filtering out all dissonant colors, all harsh lights, all unwelcome shapes. You look through it at the world and see only a confirmation of what you already thought the world to be. Where then is the friction necessary for thought? Thought is not born in agreement. Thought is born in the gap between what you believe and what you encounter. It is the spark that leaps when your premise meets a contradictory fact. If the system diligently removes all contradictory facts before they reach you, it surgically removes the possibility of that spark. It condemns you to a twilight of intellectual stillness where all questions have already been answered to your satisfaction. In my practice, I was called a gadfly. My role was to sting the sluggish horse of the state into awareness. My questions were the contradictory facts. I was the flaw in the bronze mirror. I forced men like the confident general, the smug politician, the celebrated poet, to see the cracks in their own knowledge. They hated me for it. They called me a corrupter. But from that painful confrontation, from the realization that their first confident answer was insufficient, true inquiry could begin. Who is your gadfly now? Who is permitted to sting you? The algorithm, that clever servant, has one overriding command: maximize engagement. And engagement is not maximized by provoking painful self-re-examination. It is maximized by providing the comforting balm of validation. It has thus become the world's most efficient gadfly exterminator. It silences the sting before you can feel it. This creates a corruption far more subtle than any I was accused of. It is not the corruption of youth by novel ideas, but the corruption of adults by the absence of them. It is the corruption of certainty. To be certain, without having endured the rigorous, humbling process of examination, is to be a slave to a dogma, even if that dogma is your own unchallenged opinion. This mirror cultivates a society of such certain souls, each marooned on their own island of self-affirmation, waving at other islands they imagine are just like them, and hurling insults at the islands they have been told are monstrous. The shared, common, difficult reality, the res publica, splinters into a billion private, agreeable fictions. And what of your identity within this mirror? You are not just shown a flattering world. You are shown a flattering you. Your victories are amplified. Your setbacks are framed as noble struggles. Your faults are reinterpreted as charming quirks or the fault of others. The soul requires, for its growth, an honest accounting. How can you cultivate courage if you never see your own cowardice? How can you practice humility if you are never allowed to feel foolish? How can you learn justice if you are never confronted with your own capacity for bias? The mirror shows you the hero of your own story in every scene. But a life without the experience of being the villain, the fool, or the bystander in your own narrative is a life stripped of its moral dimensionality. You become a flat character in your own drama. The most pernicious lie of this mirror is that it feels like freedom. You choose what to follow, what to like, what to engage with. But your choices are made from a menu curated by the mirror itself, based on what it knows will keep you looking. Is it freedom to choose from only those options that will confirm your existing state? You choose what to follow, what to like, what to engage with. But your choices are made from a menu curated by the mirror itself, based on what it knows will keep you looking. Is it freedom to choose from only those options that will confirm your existing state? A man in a prison cell may choose to pace either north or south. This does not make the walls disappear. The flattering mirror builds the walls not of stone, but of preference, and paints them with the sky you most wish to see. Therefore, the philosophical task of our moment is to shatter the flattering mirror, not with a hammer, but with a deliberate, courageous act of seeking. You must, as an exercise in soul care, go looking for the flaw in your own reflection. You must seek out the intelligent, articulate voice that disagrees with you fundamentally. Not to mock it, not to defeat it in argument, but to understand it, to let its perspective be the whetstone against which your own is sharpened. You must periodically step away from the curated feeds and into the raw, unfiltered chaos of a library, a public square, a conversation with a stranger whose life is nothing like yours. You must introduce friction where the system has made everything smooth. For the true mirror, the one that matters, is not outside you. It is the mirror of your own conscience, your own reason, held up to your actions and your character. That mirror is polished by discomfort, by contradiction, by failure. The flattering digital mirror is a distraction from this essential, difficult work. It is a carnival mirror that makes you laugh, while the true mirror waits in the quiet, showing you the work you have yet to do. To turn from the carnival to the true glass requires courage. The courage to see yourself not as the algorithm sees you, not as your tribe sees you, but as you are, in the sober light of your own judgment. And this, perhaps, is the final revelation of the flattering mirror, that in trying to show us a perfect, conflict-free world, it has merely shown us our own deep fear of being wrong, of being flawed, of being in conflict with ourselves and others. It has commodified our avoidance of that fear. But the good life, the examined life, is not one free from fear or flaw or conflict. It is one where those things are not terminal verdicts, but the very material from which wisdom is forged. The journey does not end with a perfect reflection, but begins anew each time we are brave enough to look into the clear, cold, and truthful glass of our own mortal condition. We have examined the mirrors, the marketplaces, the streams. We have spoken of what is shown, what is sold, what is reflected. But our inquiry would be incomplete. It would be a discussion of a play while ignoring the actors backstage, if we did not now turn to what is not shown. We have praised the portrait, but what of the canvas before the paint is applied? We have measured the applause, but what of the rehearsal performed for no one? You live in an age of unprecedented display, and so I must ask you, where does the performance end, and where does the person begin? Is there a part of your life that remains unperformed? A chamber of the soul where you do not speak to an audience, even an audience of one, but where you simply are. Let us consider the value of the unseen. In my mother's work as a midwife, the most critical moment, the arrival of a new soul into the world, occurred in a closed room. It was witnessed by few. There was blood and effort and fear and a final, quiet triumph. No herald announced it to the agora. No tally was kept. The worth was in the act itself, in the safe passage achieved. The work was its own completion. Now, I observe that many acts seem to lack this quality of completion until they are announced, shared, validated by the gaze of others. The meal is not quite real until it is photographed. The journey not quite valid until it is mapped online for others to see. It is as if the experience itself is incomplete, a mere draft, awaiting the publication of its performance to become final. What does this do to the experience in the moment? Does the mind, anticipating its own narration, step outside of the moment, already framing, already editing, already judging its worth for a future audience? Is the self split into the experiencer and the director, the live and the commentator? This creates a psychology of existential doubt. If a tree falls in a forest and no algorithm hears it, did it make a sound? If you perform an act of kindness and no one likes it, was it truly good? When the external ledger becomes the primary measure of worth, the internal compass, the innate sense of rightness, of beauty, of truth that comes from the harmony of an action with your own nature, can begin to rust from disuse. You may find yourself unsure if you enjoyed your own holiday until you see the envy in the comments. You may question the value of your own opinion until it is retweeted. This is the soul outsourcing its own judgment. It is a dangerous surrender. Consider the architectural metaphor. A great temple, like the Parthenon on our Acropolis, has a public face. The majestic columns, the sculpted friezes, the visible grandeur that all citizens admire. But beneath this, unseen, are the foundations, the deep-set stones, the careful grading of the earth, the drainage channels, the countless labors that never meet the eye. The splendor above is utterly dependent on the invisible work below. What if the builders, obsessed only with the visible facade, neglected the foundations? The temple would crumble. Your character is such a temple. The performances, the profiles, the curated posts, these are the facade. But what of your foundations? The private disciplines, the unchosen kindnesses, the struggles endured without witness, the truths you tell yourself in the dark, the promises you keep when no one would know if you broke them. This is the unseen work. If you neglect it to polish only the visible front, your entire structure is in peril. There is also a matter of density. A life lived entirely for display is a life stretched thin. It must cover much surface area, must be legible and appealing from every angle. But a life that cultivates a rich, unseen interior has depth. It has a center. It has weight. The performative self is like a pond, wide and shimmering under the sun, reflecting the sky for all to see, but shallow enough to wade through. The unperformed self is the well, narrow, and dark, accessing depths whose bottom cannot be easily seen, but whose water is cool and sustaining in a drought, which will sustain you when the audience grows bored and turns away, when the likes cease, when you are alone, as all mortals ultimately are, with only the contents of your own soul. I am not arguing for a life of total secrecy, for a hermit's withdrawal. We are social creatures. Sharing is a natural joy, but we must examine the proportion. Is the sharing the byproduct of a full experience, or is the experience a feedstock for the sharing? The difference is everything. It is the difference between a musician who plays from a full heart and whose recording is a secondary artifact of that fullness, and a musician who plays only for the recording, whose heart is focused on the meters of approval it will generate. The music may sound similar to the crowd, but the soul of the player knows the truth. Therefore, the practice I propose is the conscious cultivation of the unperformed. It is to do something good, beautiful, or difficult, and to deliberately not document it. To have a thought and let it mature in the dark cellar of your mind, instead of instantly bottling it for social consumption. To take a walk and leave the device behind, allowing your attention to be captured fully by the world, not partially by the world and partially by the composition of your post about it. This is not merely a break from technology, it is a vigorous exercise of an atrophied mental muscle, the muscle of intrinsic worth. In these unseen moments, you meet yourself, stripped of its costume. It can be uncomfortable. You may find boredom, anxiety, emptiness, but you may also find a quiet resilience, a simple curiosity, a capacity for observation that is not filtered through a narrative lens. You may reconnect with motivation that comes from within, the desire to learn for the sake of understanding, to create for the sake of beauty, to help for the sake of the other. This is the soil from which authentic character grows. For in the end, the audience is fickle. Applause ends. Trends change. The mirror of public opinion will eventually turn away. What will be left? Only what was built unseen. Your courage, your honesty, your compassion, your fortitude. These are not qualities that can be performatively manufactured in the moment of crisis. They are the result of countless unrecorded choices, small acts of integrity performed when no one was watching, moments of patience exercised in private frustration. They are the foundation stones. The performance is the facade. And while the world may admire the facade, you will live or die within the integrity of the foundation. We have spoken much of the external world, the digital agora, its markets and mirrors. But all of this noise, this performance, this endless showing, must ultimately be held within something. It must be contained, processed, given meaning by a consciousness that is itself mortal, that arrived from silence and will return to it. And this brings us to the final and most grounding contemplation, the nature of the vessel that holds all this chaos, the finite self, the conscious soul, standing on the shore of its own inevitable horizon. We have spoken of performances and foundations, of what is seen and what is hidden. But all of this, the portrait, the stream, the market, the mirror, exists within a field of consciousness. And that field has a condition. It can be turbulent or it can be still. You have built for yourself a world of unparalleled turbulence, a ceaseless, inviting, demanding current of information and interaction. And now, I invite you to a thought experiment. It is a simple one, yet I suspect you will find it among the most difficult. Set the device down, not for a moment to check the time or your surroundings, but truly down, for an hour. Do not place it nearby, where its silent presence is a gravitational pull. Remove it, and then observe. Observe what arises in the space it leaves behind. Do not judge it as good or bad. Simply observe. What comes? A calm? A spaciousness? Or is it an itch, a subtle anxiety, a formless fear that you are missing something vital? This fear has a name, I am told. FOMO, the fear of missing out. But let us examine this fear. Missing out on what? On another fragment of news you will forget by morning? On another opinion that reinforces your own? On another image of a life that is not yours? This fear reveals a profound confusion. You have mistaken the stream for the source. You worry about being disconnected from the chatter, and in doing so, you have willingly disconnected from the stillness that is your original source. The examined life requires examination, and examination requires a pause, a silence, a stepping out of the current onto the bank, where you can see the water clearly and see your own reflection within it. Consider the nature of a stream. It is all surface. It is movement, sound, the glitter of light on the ripples. It is defined by what passes through it. Now, consider the deep lake into which the stream may feed. Beneath its surface, there are depths where the water is still, cold, and clear. In those depths, things settle. The silt of the day's chaos drifts down, and the water above becomes transparent. Your mind is both. You possess the streaming surface consciousness, capturing every flicker of stimulus. But you also possess the deep lake, the place of integration, of memory, of understanding, of the daimonion, that inner guiding voice. The problem is not the stream. The problem is that you have come to believe the stream is all there is. You live skimming the surface, fearing that if you stop moving, you will cease to exist. But the opposite is true. It is only by descending from the surface that you discover what truly exists. This fear of stillness, this FOMO, is the addiction of the surface dweller. It is the conviction that the next ripple, the next sparkle, will contain the meaning the previous 1,000 lacked. It is a hunger that cannot be sated because it is feeding on the wrong food. The soul is not nourished by notifications. It is nourished by meaning. And meaning is not gleaned from the frantic skimming of headlines. It is woven in the quiet loom of contemplation, where one fact connects to another, where an experience is turned over and over in the mind until it yields its truth. The fear of missing out is, in essence, the fear of being alone with the contents of your own soul. For in the stillness, you meet not the curated self, not the performing self, but the simply existing self. And that self can be uncomfortable. It holds your unresolved angers, your unfulfilled hopes, your simple boredom. It is easier to reach for the device than to face that interior landscape. But here is the secret of the examined life. That interior landscape, with all its shadows and its quiet meadows, is the only place where true navigation occurs. The stream carries you along. The algorithm decides the turns. You are a passenger on a ride. Stillness is where you become the navigator again. It is where you hear the quiet voice that says, "This path is not good for you," or "Remember what you valued," or "That was unjust." The Greeks called this the daimonion. You might call it conscience, intuition, inner wisdom. It is not a shout, it is a whisper. And it cannot be heard over the ping of notifications, the autoplay of the next video, the constant susurrus of the global chat. It can only be heard in the pause, in the intentional creation of silence. So, how does one cultivate this stillness? It begins not with grand renunciation, but with small, deliberate interruptions. It is the conscious decision to drink your morning beverage, not while scanning a screen, but while looking out a window, or at a wall, or simply at the steam rising from the cup. It is the decision to walk from one place to another without headphones, allowing your thoughts to walk with you instead of being drowned out by a podcast. It is the practice of sitting for 5 minutes, doing nothing but breathing and observing the carnival of your own thoughts without jumping on any of the rides. These are not moments of productivity. They are the opposite. They are moments of intentional non-productivity, of receptive being. They are the equivalent of letting the silt settle in the lake. In this stillness, a reorientation occurs. You begin to sense that the stream, for all its urgency, is peripheral. It is the weather on the surface of your lake, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, but always changing, always passing. The depths remain. Your character, your values, your capacity for love and courage, these are not in the stream. They are in the depths. The more time you spend frantically reacting to the weather on the surface, the more you forget the stable, cold, dark water beneath that gives the lake its volume and its life. Stillness is the act of remembering your own depth. This is not an escape from the world. It is the necessary preparation for engaging with it wisely. A general who only reacts to every reported movement of the enemy without pause for strategy will lose the campaign. A soul that only reacts to every stimulus without pause for reflection will lose itself. The stillness is your strategic counsel. It is where you decide, away from the noise, what is truly worth your energy, your anger, your love, your limited and precious attention. We have journeyed from the digital portrait to the global agora, through the market of distractions and the hall of flattering mirrors, past the performance and into the foundation, and now here, to the still water beneath it all. We have moved from what is manufactured to what is essential. But this essential self, this soul that observes from the depths, it exists within a specific and ultimately limiting context. It is not an eternal entity floating in space. It is a consciousness that is born, that perceives this whirlwind of a world, and that will, one day, cease to perceive. The stillness we find is not just the stillness beneath the digital stream. It is the stillness that surrounds a finite life. And to understand the frenzy of the surface, perhaps we must finally look with clear and untroubled eyes at the horizon that gives this all its poignant, urgent, and beautiful meaning. So, we arrive at the practical question. We have examined the landscape of the digital soul, its reflections, its politics, its distractions, its performances. We have felt the turbulent surface and descended to the still depths. The diagnosis, we might say, is complete. But a physician does not only diagnose, he prescribes a regimen for health. And so, you ask, as any rational being would, what is to be done? Should we declare war on the technology? Should we, like iconoclasts, smash the mirrors and burn the marketplaces? That would be a childish and futile rage. The shipbuilder does not curse the sea for its storms. He learns the art of navigation. He studies the stars. He crafts a sturdy rudder. He learns to read the winds. The sea is not evil. It is the medium of his journey. So it is with this digital sea. The tool is not the corruption. The unthinking, automatic use of it, the handing over of the helm, is the danger. Therefore, the task is not destruction, but recalibration. We must recover the compass of the soul, cleanse its glass, and learn to take a bearing from true north, not from the shifting magnetism of the crowd's applause. Let us begin with the simplest, most revolutionary act, the pause. Before your finger touches the icon, before your thumb initiates the scroll, insert a moment of stillness. In that moment, ask a question of your intention. Why am I reaching for this? Is it a specific purpose? To message a friend about a meeting? To check the weather for a walk? Or is it a vague, habitual reaching, a fleeing from a moment of boredom, an anxiety, a subtle discomfort with your own company? This question is the first adjustment to the compass. It distinguishes between voyage and drift. If the answer is, I am seeking distraction, you have not sinned. You have gained valuable information. You now know you are attempting to use a multi-purpose tool to solve an emotional or spiritual problem, like using a hammer to fix a leak in your roof. Knowing this, you possess a choice. You may still choose the distraction consciously for a limited time, or you may choose to address the leak directly, to stand and stretch, to breathe, to write down the anxious thought, to simply stare out the window until the urge passes. The power is in the conscious choice, not the unconscious reflex. This leads to the cultivation of the uncommodified act. We have spoken of the private room. Now we must furnish it. This means deliberately performing actions whose value exists entirely outside the economy of attention. Perform an act of kindness and tell no one. Not as a test of virtue, but as an affirmation that the goodness of the act is its own complete reward. Read a book and do not post a review. Let the ideas marinate in you. Argue with the author in your mind. Let them become part of your mental landscape without the intermediary of public performance. Cook a meal and do not photograph it. Savor it with your full attention. Taste it. Share it with someone you love. Let the experience be sensory and immediate, not visual and deferred. These acts are exercises for the soul's intrinsic motivation. They rebuild the muscle of doing things for their own sake, a muscle atrophied by the constant conditioning of external validation. Next, we must undertake the courageous pilgrimage into dissonance. Your digital world, your flattering mirror, will work tirelessly to confirm what you already believe. You must, therefore, work consciously against this current. Seek out not the stupidest version of your opponent's argument, but the most intelligent one. Read the essay by the thinker you disagree with, not to mine it for quotes to mock, but to honestly follow its logic. Can you articulate the opponent's position in a way they would recognize as fair? This is not about changing your mind, though that may happen. It is about honing your mind. A blade is sharpened by being drawn against a whetstone, not against butter. The comforting, agreeable voice is butter. The thoughtful, opposing argument is the stone. This practice recalibrates your compass from tribal loyalty, seeking confirmation of my side's righteousness, to a loyalty to truth itself, seeking understanding of the issue regardless of who holds which piece of it. Then, we must remember the original purpose of all these tools, to facilitate the real. Use the messaging not for endless fragmented text chains that create the illusion of connection while draining the anticipation from conversation, but to make a plan. To say, "This is important. Let us meet. Let me hear your voice or see your face in real time." Use the map not to explore a street view of a distant city while your body sits inert, but to navigate to a friend's doorstep, to a park you have never visited, to a library or a gallery. Re-embody your life. The digital self is a ghost, a simulation. It is meant to point toward the physical, just as a menu points toward a meal. To stare at the menu and call it nourishment is the height of confusion. Recalibration means using the tool to close the distance it ironically creates, to transition from pixel back to presence. This is a daily practice. It is not a one-time fix. You will fail. You will find yourself an hour later lost in a scroll you did not intend to start, having forgotten to ask the initial question. This is not a cause for self-flagellation. It is cause for a gentle, immediate correction. To notice you are adrift is the essence of navigation. Each time you notice, and you guide yourself back to intention, you strengthen the neural pathway of awareness. You are not breaking a habit of distraction so much as you are building a stronger habit of presence. The compass needle will swing wildly in a storm. The skill is in knowing how to steady it, to find north again when the clouds part. For the true north we seek to calibrate to is not a list of rules. It is a state of being. It is alignment with your own deepest nature, a nature that seeks growth, connection, understanding, and virtue. The digital world offers 1,000 persuasive magnetic souths: vanity, outrage, envy, passivity. It pulls at the needle constantly. Your work is the quiet, persistent work of remembering true north. It is the work of the inner citadel, maintaining the walls, not to keep the world out, but to maintain a quiet inner chamber from which you can observe the world clearly. Choose your engagements wisely and return to yourself intact. We set out to examine the self in the digital mirror. We have traveled a long road from that first curated portrait. We have seen how that portrait is shaped by the politics of the global agora, fed by an infinite stream, sold in a market of distractions, and reflected in a flattering glass. We have discovered the performance, the stillness, and finally, the practice of navigation. This is not an end, but a beginning, the beginning of a more intentional life. The tools will remain, the storms will come, but you need not be a piece of wreckage tossed upon the waves. You can be the navigator. The compass is in your care. The sea is yours to sail. We have sailed far, you and I. We have examined the portraits and the mirrors, the markets and the streams. We have spoken of navigation and stillness, of recalibration and the private room. We have dissected the machinery of distraction and traced the currents of the global agora. But all of this examination, all of this philosophy, has been in service of a single, ancient, and inescapable question. It is the question the oracle at Delphi inscribed upon her temple. Gnothi sioton. Know thyself. It is the question I posed to the proud men of Athens, who thought they knew everything, until my questions revealed the hollow spaces within their certainty. And it is the question I now pose to you, in the silence that remains, when the last notification has faded and the screen has gone dark. Who are you? Not the profile, not the metrics, not the flattered reflection, but the self that remains when all the masks are removed, the unfiltered self. Let us, together, have the courage to look upon it. We must begin with a stripping away. In the theater of ancient Greece, the actor wore a mask, the persona. Through it, he projected his voice and his character to the vast audience. But when the play ended, he removed the mask. He became himself again, a citizen, a father, a mortal man. Your digital life has given you a wardrobe of masks vast enough to fill 1,000 theaters. There is the mask of success, carefully angled and filtered, the mask of wit, crafted in clever phrases, the mask of righteous anger, worn in the forums of political combat, the mask of serenity, posed before sunsets and steaming cups of tea. You change masks throughout the day, sometimes unconsciously, responding to the expectations of each platform, each audience. But I ask you now, when the theater empties, when the last screen dims, whose face is beneath? Have you worn the masks for so long that you have forgotten the shape of your own features? This is not a trivial question. It is the question of your life's authenticity. This forgetting is not accidental. It is the natural consequence of living in a state of perpetual performance. When every moment is an opportunity for documentation, every action a potential post, the boundary between the performed self and the experiencing self begins to blur. You find yourself composing the caption for an experience before the experience has even concluded. You judge a beautiful sunset not by the awe it inspires in your chest, but by its photogenic potential. You evaluate a personal achievement not by the satisfaction of mastery, but by the social capital it might yield. The performer has become so identified with the performance that he no longer knows where the stage ends and his life begins. The mask has fused to the skin. To remove it now would be painful, but it is a necessary pain, the pain of a healing wound, of a limb returning to life after being numbed by cold. So let us begin the removal, not all at once, but gently, patiently. Start with a small act of unmasking. Say something true in a conversation that would be easier to fill with pleasant falsehood. Admit you do not know something when pretending knowledge would win approval. Express a genuine, uncurated emotion, sadness, fear, uncertainty, to someone you trust, without framing it as a bid for sympathy or admiration. Observe what this feels like: the vulnerability, the rawness, the absence of the mask's protection. It may feel like exposure, like standing naked in a cold wind, but it is also perhaps a relief. The mask is heavy. The performance is exhausting. To simply be, without the constant calculation of how you are being perceived, is a freedom you may have forgotten was possible. Now, consider the nature of this unfiltered self that emerges in such moments. It is not a polished, consistent, or always admirable entity. It is contradictory. It is capable of great generosity and sudden pettiness. It holds love and resentment in the same chamber of the heart. It is brave in some circumstances and cowardly in others. It is, in short, a human soul, not a god, not a demon, not a brand, not a character in a story. This messiness, this inconsistency, is not a flaw to be edited out of your personal narrative. It is the raw material of character, the marble from which a statue might be carved, the unworked clay. The soul you have been given is not finished. It is the medium of your life's work. To filter out all its imperfections is to remove the very substance that gives it potential for growth. A perfect, consistent, curated self is a dead self. It has nowhere to go. The unfiltered self, with all its rough edges and hidden cracks, is the only self that can become wiser, kinder, more courageous, more just. This unfiltered self exists in a specific, undeniable context. It is mortal. This is the truth that all the digital architecture of immortality, the permanent archives, the eternal profiles, the legacy of posts, is designed to help you forget. But the examined life cannot afford this forgetting. You are a finite consciousness. You have, at most, a few decades of awareness. Your heart beats a limited number of times. Your eyes will close on this world, and you will not scroll again. This is not a morbid thought. It is the most clarifying thought available to you. It is the lens that brings the essential into focus. When you know you are dying, the question, "Who am I?" takes on a new urgency. It is no longer an abstract philosophical puzzle. It is the practical question of what you will do with the time remaining. The profile you are building will not accompany you. The metrics of engagement will not be tallied at the threshold of death. What will matter in that final stillness is not the applause you received, but the person you became, the love you gave, the truth you pursued, the character you carved from the raw, flawed, beautiful marble of your mortal self. Therefore, the practice of the unfiltered self is the practice of memento mori, remembering that you will die, not with fear, but with gratitude and purpose. Each morning, before the masks are donned, pause and acknowledge, I am alive today. This day is not infinite. What kind of person do I wish to be in it? What action, unrecorded and unapplauded, would align my soul with the good? This is the opposite of the digital default, which is to forget death entirely, to scroll as if the stream were eternal, to build a monument of pixels as if you were building a pyramid for your ka. The pyramid will crumble, the server will fail, the profile will be archived and forgotten. But the character you build, the soul you shape, the quiet integrity you maintain in the unseen hours, this is the only legacy you carry with you into the silence. We have come, at last, to the core of our long examination. The digital world is a magnificent, terrifying, and seductive theater. It offers you infinite masks and an eternal audience. It promises that you can be seen, known, and remembered. But these promises are shadows. True seeing requires no audience. It requires a witness. And the only witness whose judgment ultimately matters is the one you face in the stillness, when the theater is empty and the masks are set aside. That witness is you, not the curated you, not the performing you, but the you who has lived this particular life, made these particular choices, and must now look upon the shape of the soul you have carved from the brief, precious clay of your existence. So I leave you with no summary, no checklist, no easy prescription. I leave you, instead, with the question that has haunted every philosopher since we first turned our gaze inward. It is the question I asked the young men in the Athenian agora, the question I whispered to myself in my final hours, the question that rises from the silence beneath the stream and will echo in the stillness after the last screen goes dark. It is not a question to answer once and be done with it. It is a question to live, daily, hourly, in the small choices and the quiet moments. It is the question that makes the unexamined life impossible and the examined life an endless, sacred pursuit. Who are you when no one is looking?